The U.S. Brig Niagara was built in Erie in 1813, launching first on June 4th of that year, and it was one of many vessels that was made to win the war on the water. The War of 1812 actually lasted nearly 3 years, embroiling much of the French, British, and American empires. Lake Erie was a key site of conflict because of its location between Canada, still part of the British Empire at the time, and the United States. The Brig wasn't the only ship built to defend the U.S. interest in the war. The USS Lawrence, also a 493-ton Niagara-class brig, was Commodore Perry's flagship. Both were built carpenters and not by shipwrights.
Plans for the construction of Niagara are sketchy. We know that the ship was built not by experienced shipwrights, but instead by carpenters. So the suspicion is that the original Niagara would have been a little bit rougher than the present day reconstruction is. We also know that the Niagara was intended for one single battle. That was not constructed like a ship in the Atlantic might have been, that was intended to serve for years. The Niagara and the other ships in that fleet, including the Lawrence, they were built for one battle. And so again, the suspicion is that the Niagara would have been pretty rough, and outfitted as minimally as possible. Present-day Niagara, you'll notice that they use a tiller instead of the more famous wheel that you'll see on any pirate ship or any film. And the reason that they did that in the reconstruction of the present-day Niagara was kind of a nod to this simplicity that I'm just talking about. That had they wanted to put a wheel in, that would have been much more expensive, much more time consuming, and under that in that spirit of simplicity, they probably had a tiller in there, which again they've fitted into the present day reconstruction.
The original brig wasn't a cruising vessel. It was built for one battle.
The Battle of Lake Erie was the culmination of the efforts to build the fleet in present day Erie. Oliver Hazard Perry, leading the Americans, sallied out of Erie, sailed west to roughly present-day Put-in Bay, and there encountered the fleet commanded by Barclay for the British. And there he defeated the British and seized for the United States command of the lake.
The sea battle came to a head at Put-in Bay just outside of Ohio. When the Lawrence was disabled by the enemy, Commander Perry had to move over to the Niagara. After victory in the Battle of Lake Erie, the Brig Niagara was sailed into Misery Bay on Presque Isle Island.
Docked in what's now called Misery Bay. Misery Bay, of course, is on the Presque Isle Peninsula across from the city. The idea here was that Perry wanted to keep his sailors away from all the vices and excitement, if you will, in Erie, and so that's actually where Misery Bay gets its name. The fleet docked there, and then of course as the winter set in, the ships were docked in the ice across from, it wouldn't have been a very big city in 1813, but certainly more exciting than what was happening on the ship.
After the Americans won the war, the brig wasn't used again. Along with the other warships, the crew scuttled the ship in Misery Bay, where it laid at the bottom of the lake for a century. In 1913, in honor of a centennial of the Battle of Lake Erie, the Brig Niagara was raised from the lake floor. The knee was largely intact, which allowed the Centennial Committee to commission its rebuilding. All that year, the reconstructed brig was showcased around the Great Lakes. After 1917, the city of Erie took ownership of the ship, but let it sit unused in the harbor, rotting away until the USS Niagara Foundation formed in 1929. Little of the original Brig Niagara remains in the reconstructed vessel today. The U.S. Brig Niagara still sits in the Erie Harbor alongside the Erie Maritime Museum. Today, students and locals can participate in the Niagara Sailing Training Program and become lifelong crew members, keeping the history of the brig, Commodore Perry's victory, and Lake Erie's sea battle alive.